We're back, Brigadoon Radio, with our good friend, Gerald Ashley, where we talk about emerging issues shaping commerce and culture. Gerald, how you been?
I'm very well. I've nothing much to report in my world. It's all in the outside world, so I think we got quite a lot to talk about today. And I don't know. We started this podcast, I think, in the perfect year. Maybe not for the world, but for us, because we don't lack stories. So as ever, I'll let you serve the first ball and see where we go.
Well, you are right. We've got on top, I think, 3 interesting issues. We'll see what our viewers decide. But we're going to start down under, where it's already Saturday morning. We just checked. It's already Saturday. In the future, Sydney. We're going to talk about the election that's coming up in Australia this weekend. The Aussies vote on Saturday, which is fantastic. I think that's actually an interesting idea. Here in the States, we vote on Tuesday because of the rumor is because of farmers. The farmers could go to the market on Tuesday, and that's why we decided to vote on Tuesday. Anyways, our friends in Australia are voting. We won't have the results, I don't think, by the time we finish this pod, because they're just starting to vote. But what I'm looking for in this election, I think it's, I always like paying attention to what's happening in elections around the world to kind of get a sense of what might happen here in the U.S. What are you looking for in the Australian election?
A couple of themes. I mean, obviously, a lot of themes are local, but the big one, which seems to be very important in Australia these days, is climate. And whoever's running Australia's got a really big problem with climate, not just so much the weather and the climate outside, but the economy is in all the wrong industries. I mean, essentially, I think, isn't it the biggest hole in the world is in Australia for open cast mining? And, they do a lot of digging stuff up and selling it to everybody else. And there's no way of putting a gloss on it. It's bad for the environment to do it, and it's often sending stuff that makes the environment worse again. That said, there is a political movement to do something about it in Australia, and here's a chance to invent a new colour in politics: teal, a sort of light green shade, and that seems to be a kind of, I suppose, less radical green element. And they seem to be fairly independent of the 2 main parties. So this may seem a stretch, but I wonder, is Australia moving into the same sort of politics that we've seen in France for the last 10 years, where the major parties start floundering and splintering and changing? So I think the results this time around are going to be very interesting in Australia.
Yeah, you've nailed the 3 things I'm super interested in. It does seem like climate is front and center in this election because of that teal breakaway group. But Australia's a huge extraction economy. They've got a massive market all over Asia to sell all kinds of raw materials. And I don't see that going away. The 2 leaders of the 2 major parties have said, they want to make some kind of progress in climate, but they're still supporting the coal industry. This teal movement is, I think, very interesting. My understanding, you're right, it's not as progressive as like a radical green, kind of political party we might see here in the States or even in Europe. But they tend to be professionals, they may have a degree or 2. They kind of work in the leafy suburbs of the big cities in Australia. They want to see some kind of progress made in the environment, but they also have got, kind of conservative tendencies. But this fracturing, this kind of new political movements, we're seeing it all over. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that now more than ever, anybody can see what's happening in other parts of the world, and they want to emulate what's happening in France, what's happening in the UK, what's happening in the US, and I think that's shaping elections all around the world.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that. And I don't think we see a radical change overnight or currently as is today in Australia, but maybe there'll be a huge surprise. But to use the old phrase, the tectonic plates are shifting. And it does seem to favour well-organised sort of parties that almost operate as raiding groups for their own special interests and then try and join in coalitions. Now, coalitions don't always work. I mean, Germany has got probably the most bizarre coalition at the moment, with very radical Greens on one end and absolutely head-banging free marketeers on the other end. And this is part of the reason I think Chancellor Scholz is finding life difficult. Whether Scott Morrison survives, even if his party wins, must be a moot point. Large part of the party thinks he's the problem. So maybe we get Labour, maybe we get Liberal, but do we get Liberal and Scott Morrison? I kind of doubt. but we're outsiders in this vote, and so maybe we're not close enough to things. But as you say, I think the Teal group is portends to the future.
Yeah, one of these headlines: dislike of Morrison remains a dominant factor in the campaign. Here's another headline: Australian election contest of character and competence. Once again, yeah, we have a leader of a major political party who apparently isn't well liked, but he remains in the job. And even this week, Morrison, said, "I do come across like a bulldozer sometime, like trying to soften his image in the final days of the campaign." Very interesting. I think what's also interesting, we've got this quad meeting that's supposed to start on Monday in Tokyo, and the election's on Saturday. They're hoping to have a winner announced by Sunday. Anthony Albanese, who's the leader of the Labour Party, has said, if I win, I'm going to be sworn in, and I'm going to attend the quad. So we have a situation where the other three members of the quad don't really know who's going to show up from Australia, and maybe nobody shows up, which is another interesting point of the geopolitics of this election.
These multilateral things are never that easy. One quick thing on policy, which is in Australia, in Scott Morrison's party and his manifesto, which I think is particularly mad. I would go so far as to say brain dead. There's a real problem with property prices in Australia, and people comment on many of the major economies. People find it incredibly difficult to get on the so-called property ladder, and Morrison and co are suggesting or promulgating the idea that young people can raid their retirement funds,
right,
be startup capital to get a house. This is madness squared, because you're not actually creating any properties, you're just injecting more money into the property market. Now, you don't need to have a PhD to work out if you're chasing more money or forcing more money into a property market with no more property, guess where the prices go. Now, we've had this sort of nonsense in the UK in a slightly different form, and governments are forever trying to rescue property markets by injecting more money in. Small hint, why don't they try building a few more houses? It's just mad.
Yeah, I've not had the fortune to visit Australia yet, but I've always heard these stories about the crazy pricing, and I speculate too that there could be outside buyers maybe that are inflating the prices. Is it really a question of there's just not enough inventory in Australia? Is that one of the main drivers of the real estate problems?
I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. I've not been to Australia, but here's our open plea for an invitation to do a live show in Sydney. We are available. But yeah, it's a long-term problem. This has been 10, 20, 30 years. But that's the similar sort of problem we've had in the States and the UK. Obviously, in the States, we've had a particularly interesting property crash in the middle of all of that, 08, 09, and 10. UK less so. But almost in my lifetime, I can't think of anybody saying, well, there's too much property around and it's so cheap, we don't know what to do with it. One exception was Ireland, where Ireland overdeveloped in the 2010s, and they ended up knocking new housing down that was never used. But in general, there's a shortage of property, and of course it wins votes.
Yeah.
Old guys like me who own property will vote for somebody. It doesn't change, depress the price. We're all going to vote for keep the prices high.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm just reading here. The polls open at 8 a.m., which I'm guessing is 8 hours from now, and they close at 6 p.m. sharp. So I don't even know what time that'll be in the U.S., but that's the situation. Maybe I can do some quick math here because it's 14 hours ahead. Anyways, that's what we have. So the polls will open in 8 hours' time in Australia.
Yeah, it sounds like sometime Saturday morning you'd know the results. One last thing about Australian elections, of course, it's compulsory to vote.
Right.
So I don't think everybody does vote, and I don't know quite what happens if you don't, and all the rest of it. Whether people spoil their ballot paper and whether you get fined if you don't vote. But they've always made a big thing about it is supposed to be compulsory voting.
And some other sides too. Because of the COVID situation, you've got people that can vote by phone, which is interesting, which I have not heard before, and of course, vote by mail will still be in action. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with Australia. I guess we'll know the winner by who shows up in Tokyo. That'll be maybe both Morrison and Albanese will be booking flights to Japan, and we'll see who shows up.
Hopefully, it's a clean handover, not one of these messy ones where they're fighting to get on a plane or whatever.
That makes for some great television then. So at baggage handling, exactly. That's my bag. All right, here we go. Let's talk to something really wild. The 3 Fs. Food, fuel, and finance. What a week. All the numbers are just commodity prices off the charts, the finance market going the other direction, everything falling away. Explain what is happening, Gerald.
Well, I think we can sort of do a little bit of self-congratulation here. I think we're on this story not at the very start, but certainly by February into March, when we mentioned it a few times, it was very clear that there's trouble ahead in the food or the grain market, really, to be precise, and also in things like vegetable oils. And it all comes from the fact that Ukraine has got a war on its hands, obviously, and there's going to be a much lower agricultural yield this year. It won't be zero, but it will be a lot lower than before. And it's worth bearing in mind Russia, that's not affected in quite the same way, though there may be sanctions. Russia and Ukraine represent about 30% of the grains market. So this is kind of big. And it's probably not going to cause a lot of grief in, upscale vegetarian shops in California, where, does it really matter whether you can get that particular pulse or grain or whatever? But for large swathes of the world, bread is life, and that is still the case. The Middle East, this is a serious political hot potato, to the extent we've already seen Egypt stopped any exporting of flour and bread and all the rest of it. And India had a go at stopping exports a couple of weeks ago, but they seem to have backpedaled from that. And the old phrase that problems don't come singly, they come in battalions. Down the other end of the Middle East in Morocco, they've just had the most terrible drought, or experiencing the most terrible drought for 30 years, and plunging amounts of grain and wheat are going to be produced in that part of the world. So this normally means political trouble ahead, to be honest.
Yeah, this idea of, you just nailed it. Even Sri Lanka, what's happening there, there was a column that Mohammed El-Renan wrote this week, and the title was "Beware of Global Economy with Little Fires." There's so much focus here, obviously in DC, and what's happening in Ukraine. The president today is in Seoul, kind of big stuff. But you look around the world, there are little pockets of fire everywhere, and none of them are good. Instability, people going hungry, people in the streets. I think we're in for a very dicey year ahead of us. A lot
of this stuff is interlinked.
Yeah.
And it also plays into the worst possible time with all the general supply chain chaos that we still have post the pandemic, or what we hopefully think is post the pandemic. So that there are enough dislocations in the world economy without all of this, and some of the dislocations, which I think we touched on before, may seem slightly bizarre. So Ukraine is a very big producer of neon gas.
Right.
And neon gas you need to make microchips with in the manufacturing process. A friend of mine's ordered a rather nice, I say British car, these days it's made by the Germans, but it's a Mini Cooper. He ordered it in March, and there's no way he's going to get that Mini Cooper before the end of September.
Wow.
I don't think he's holding his breath then. And it's the lack of microchips. So there's also, obviously we talk about food, but the whole supply chain thing is a mess as well. So those two together are big trouble.
Yeah, and we have the COVID situation in Shanghai. I saw a stat last week that over half of Apple's suppliers in Shanghai proper are in some kind of COVID situation. So you've got to think that Johnny's not going to get his, iPhone for Christmas. This thing's going to go on for a while. And what's really startling to me, I mean, obviously I pay attention to this stuff, you pay attention to this stuff, but I mean, rattling it off, like literally going around the world and saying, here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem. I've never experienced anything like this in my life. People are going back saying this is something like from the 70s. It even seems more dramatic to me than even the 70s. I feel like we're really in unprecedented territory.
I would say yes and no. I think the 70s at the time felt directly very bad in the way that currently where you and I are sitting, they don't feel quite so bad. We're not actually queuing at filling stations. The British government very nearly brought in rationing of petrol and diesel, but in other ways it's more enhanced because it's self-evidently we're in a much more interconnected world, and all those connections are they're all kind of vital. I think we've always given this example before, but you sit at home, you get into Amazon, you hit the Amazon Prime button, and you order something that arrives 24 hours later at your home. Now, there's a lot of supply chain that's got that to the Amazon warehouse. Amazon have got the capital to be able to sit on all that stuff. But I think we're going to have to get used to the idea that all this just in time, I want it now, it's either going to get more expensive in time or in money, or both, I think.
Well, I think that isn't this idea of sacrifice or, can't get stuff right away. We got a baby formula situation here in the States, and Biden invoked the Defense Production Act. In fact, the U.S. government is flying in formula from Zurich, Switzerland to Indiana for it to be distributed. And we have our friend Andrew Bailey, the Bank of England. Britain faces apocalyptic raise in food prices because of the war. I see where you got bureaucrats and politicians trying to get ahead of this thing, using tools or kind of setting the groundwork. Do they see stuff that we don't know, or are they just moving faster just to keep the political voters happy?
I would never credit these guys for being faster than events. I think they're always somewhat behind events. Easy to say after the fact, and I didn't say it before, but I think more attention should have been paid to the restarting of the economy. And I know some economists, a minority, said that will be an inflationary effect. There's a sudden pent-up demand and there'll be a surge and all the rest of it. But as everybody keeps saying, and everybody said, well, no, don't worry, it's not a problem. We've been printing money like nobody's business for a number of years. And how to say, is inflation actually the delayed cost for the free money we've had for the last 2 or 3 years? So, there is no free lunch, and it's going to come out in inflation. And in some ways, I mean, government's got a bit of a tightrope here, because a nice quick dose of inflation helps on the debt. It kind of washes down the value of the debt. But if it becomes embedded in the economy and people start demanding more and more pay rises, then you've got a problem. And I think that's the problem we're close to. As to Mr. Bailey's apoplexy over food prices, I mean, I don't know, where is apoplectic on the price scale? But I mean, 10% a one-off is a bad enough hit. If it's a one-off hit, the inflation data might actually fall quite a lot next year because of the base rate effect as it drops out of the system. But a second year of 10%, and then we are in the 1970s.
Well, I think, I haven't really noticed, just in my own local shopping, I mean, I haven't really noticed that much of an uptick when I go to the market, frankly, to buy kind of staples. And I mean, maybe it's a few bucks, but it hasn't been that noticeable to me. What I think is interesting is some of this inflation being driven by fear, and the fact that many small businesses don't have pricing power, right? That is, are they already inflating the price because they're afraid of what is happening when we're getting these messages about the Defense Production Act? When a reputable organization like the Bank of England says we're in a crisis situation, that gets so much attention. Is that you know what I'm trying to say? Like, is inflation sometimes caused because of fear? People are afraid of what's happening, and they want to be ahead of it.
I think one aspect to this is, I think you're right about pricing power. There are people who gain in inflationary times. If you want to be charging inflation rather than buying it, and the consumer is likely to be on the wrong end of that equation. But it's quite interesting that some of the big store chains in the States, their share price has been smacked. So Target took a hell of a hit a few days ago. And I think the market thought that the big boys could absorb all this price stuff and that they would have a pricing power to push it through. Maybe that's not the case. I think also Walmart had a rough time in the market. So the markets, I think the financial markets are adjusting to the idea that this might be around for quite a long time, that it's not just a one-off 3-6 month hit. I'm hoping to be a bit more optimistic about that, but like a lot of our conversations, we always end up coming back to China, because China needs to get back in the game and not be locked down and all the rest of it, and that might free up a lot of these problems. But we'll see.
Well, for some of these companies, especially not kind of retailers, but people that sell to retailers, like Nike of the world, like 20% of their revenue, Apple, 20% of their revenue is all from China. Having China depressed at all, I think, creates other kind of anxieties in the marketplace. I realize the stock market isn't the economy, but oh my gosh, these numbers are just terrifying. And just if you listen to these financial experts, the word recession is being thrown around like crazy. You're spot on. All the retailers took a major hit. Technology. I mean, I saw a stat that Facebook is down 50% in 1 year. Like, they've lost 50% of the market capitalization. I don't know where this money is going.
I can tell you. I can tell you where that money is. It's in the It's in the metaverse, Mark. There's a parallel world where it is. Now, of course, it's gone into thin air. But you could say the valuations were.
Well, that's what you're probably going where I'm going to say. Are we just at the tail end of a 20-year kind of crazy bull market? And is it not like it's not unexpected that these companies got to come back to reality, lose 20-30%? I mean, it's hard to think Facebook's going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, it's time to invoke the great sort of market observer Peter Lynch. He wrote the book, I think it's called On How to Get One Up on Wall Street. He's a fund manager, and people can find loads of his talks on YouTube or wherever. He's been around forever, and he, on a number of occasions, has made the observation that stock prices often decline by up to 20% about every 5 or 6 years.
Yeah,
the market memory is shorter than that. Everybody looks at 3-year horizons, and so we're all terrified when it drops. Now, the problem is, if you're a long-term holder, you just kind of, turn off Bloomberg, or you turn off all these wacko dealing or trading room shows, and you ignore it. The problem is for people who may be using our investments that they need to draw some of that down. And we live in a world now where maybe we are more aligned to the stock market than we were before, because I guess, what is it in the US? It's IRA accounts and the
401ks. I mean, just compulsory. The amount of money that just flowing in just because of financial schemes or payment schemes is off the charts.
It was very much a sort of rich man's hobby, the stock market, until the mid 1970s or even mid 1980s. We're all much more engaged in it now, which may or may not be a good thing. The old days of you just got your pension from the company pension fund when you retired. Now you may be asked to start playing the markets a bit. And of course, people are being encouraged to do that in a bull market, and they may find life a little bit harder going forward. So that's another cheerful thought.
Well, speaking of harder, I saw Elon Musk. He made the bid for the Twitter, I think, for $44 billion, and he's lost $48 billion in Tesla stock since this market correction. I don't know. That seems like a big number. I'm not a huge.
It is a big number, but isn't it about time somebody lost $1 trillion? I mean, I can remember when $1 million was a hell of a lot of money. And then we moved it. I don't know, when did we move into the billions? Sometime in the 1990s, I guess, when we started having all this .com craziness. Now we've had a few market caps get over a trillion, well over a trillion. And the headline's always billions wiped off the markets.
Right.
I think we should ask our vast swathe of viewers, when will the first trillion wipe off day be? Probably in the next 5 or 10 years. So there we are.
That will be exciting. That actually will be good for CNBC. That'll be some good commentary. Speaking of big investments, I want to talk to you about electric vehicles and work from home. Right. I've been thinking about this. EVs, electric vehicles, are dependent on people needing cars to go somewhere, right? But if more and more of us are working from home, or maybe we only need to go to the city once or twice a week, does the EV investment race slow down? Because is the world changing where we just don't need cars as much? Is that possible?
Well, I think you published something the other day on your insights about there's this big move in big cities, the kind of anti-car. And, there's a lot of talking of turning, it's flash now. You don't talk about a square. You have to have a piazza. So we're going to have piazzas everywhere because that kind of sounds more sexy. And certainly the experience in London, it's becoming a total nightmare to try and drive around in London. Not that I've ever driven in London, really, but if you want to get a black...
Well, you have a driver. How would you know what it's like to drive in London?
Yeah, but I like to direct from the rear, obviously. But there's no doubt that somewhere like London, and I just imagine Washington, I don't know so much about New York, but London and Washington are pretty anti-car. But it's very easy to live in central London without a car. You just need one. Now I'm kind of more in the old-fashioned commuter belt here, so I'm 45 minutes from the centre of London, and people still use a car a lot here. But if I'm honest, I can have everything delivered by the local grocery company or Amazon or whoever. A lot of people. Something I've never really done, but a huge number of my friends do a huge amount of meals via the internet. Whether it's just a snack, to watch the television, or it's some sort of grand family dinner. People are not cooking. So you're right, the style of life is changing a great deal. But the thing about EVs, which I think is going to, will it restrict them or not? I mean, I still think there's a big issue about range, and there's a huge issue about cost. Yeah, I mean, you have to be a wealthy person to buy an electric vehicle. Plus, they're subsidized. I don't know if they are in the States, but they're subsidized in the UK and Europe. I mean, you're getting something in dollar terms, probably $5,000 or $6,000 off the price. But they're not. They're not.
Yeah, there's subsidized here. There's definitely encouragement. And that factoid you talked about, New York is proposing this New York 25 by 25. Basically, they want to convert 25% of all New York street space by 2025 to walkable pedestrian plazas, bike lanes, green space, etc. No car. And that, I don't know, 2025, I think is like 2-3 years away, but
no time.
It seems a little aggressive, but there is a movement in the big cities, and once again, we've got this bifurcation about urban cores, suburban, rural. Certainly, if you're a rural contractor, you're going to need some kind of truck, and there's a lot of.
This is political. If you're inside the Beltway, if you're in Westminster or in the whole of central London, you can't imagine why you'd ever need a car.
Yeah,
but London isn't Britain. And, Washington, New York are not the United States. And I think it's got a big political element, which is in British politics. It goes back hundreds of years, which has always been rural versus cities. That's always been one of the main dynamics. And I just think that's heightened. And so I think if you were to do a poll of Londoners in London, they would want to scrap the car.
Yeah.
You try and do that anywhere, even 30 miles out of London, they think you're mad. And so how this all pans out, I don't know. One element in this is going to be the price of the true price of electric cars if they kind of become commonplace. Because where the hell's the electricity coming from? where's all the lithium coming from? And I know one of your notes, you hinted at somebody's dreamt up a battery that doesn't explode or something.
Yeah, there was a great headline. Let's find a battery that charges faster but doesn't blow up. I mean, that is part of the problem, right? I mean, these things are combustible. The infrastructure spend, I don't know. It is exciting. Like, I could see if I was running Ford Motor Company or General Motors or VW, like the excitement of building a whole new industry, infrastructure. I mean, it's like big toys. You know, it's like, it's exciting. But I don't know. Is it needed? Will we actually need it? And is there the energy there, no pun intended, to make it happen?
Yeah, no. I think also, I wonder if it might just be a gigantic false move, and that the real move is going to be in fuel cells. I think I may be rather ahead of current thinking on this, but I think hydrogen cars, and particularly bigger vehicles, have got a lot going for them. I mean, Elon Musk has got some battery-driven truck coming out or something, but how many batteries does that truck have so that it can carry anything at all? I suspect the mathematics aren't in favor of that. But we've already got hydrogen buses in London. I know that Germans are building some hydrogen trains, and it might work very well in the big sort of long-distance trucking industry as well. So I'm not certain that electric vehicles are the silver bullet that we're being sold.
I'm with you. I'm quite bullish on hydrogen, and it does seem, there's multiple ways. We have multiple fuel now, right, to move different devices. We have jet fuel, we have diesel fuel, we have various petrol, etc. You got to think there's going to be multiple fuel sources out there, and to go all EV, I don't know. It just seems, I don't know. It just seems super interesting and super wild, to be totally honest.
Yeah, and I think maybe it is. You're right. It is an exciting time for business because there are going to be some big winners and big losers in all this. It may well be that the oil companies do quite well out of all of this. Everybody's busy shutting down the oil companies. Well, hang on a moment. And then people are screaming there's no natural gas, and there may not be enough oil and all the rest of it. And oil's a long-term game. It's a 20, 30-year kind of investment horizon and delivery horizon. And so I can see oil. I can see big oil being around for a very long time, even if you believe the idea it's a transition to this new cleaner world. You can't just shut it down in 5 years or something. It's madness. Well, it wouldn't work. Well, it would be the Stone Age. It would be the Stone Age.
Then there's no cars and there's plenty of plazas. There's plenty of pedestrian walking in the Stone Age, as far as I know.
So we can cook our food on the local piazza. It's just mad.
Sounds delightful. As long as you can have a Negroni, that doesn't sound too bad. Something to watch. I've been noodling on this idea of if you change the way people work and move, you need cars and
which
something
is
to pay attention to.
Yeah, your second part of the equation here, working from home. We saw the big rush. You had to be at home. Then there's the sort of maybe we're going back to a hybrid model. I sense I don't think we're going back to 5 days a week, but the hybrid model may be more in the office than some people realize. I think it's at least a 3-day week, or we'll see. But I think some big companies are really trying to push people back into the office. We'll see.
Yeah. So and there's all kinds of gimmicks. My wife was in her office this week, and there was this is an actual situation to encourage people to come into the office. They rented bikes from a local bike, purveyor. They're electric bikes. They also had a blender. I kid you not, a blender attached to the bike, so you can make yourself a smoothie as you pedal. I didn't know how to explain this. You pedal the blender. You make yourself a smoothie. You're conquering two things at once. You're being green. You're being eco. You're getting something healthy for you. But
yeah, this is.
I can't imagine that's going to get you into the office because of some bicycle-powered blender.
This is at the edge of metropolitan madness, isn't it? the idea that it's the blender that swung me to the idea of going back to the office. But yeah, you're right. I think a lot of people are kind of feeling their way. The one thing I think you can't easily do working from home is marketing. So if I want to go and sell something to you, it's more likely it's going to be successful if we meet in person, I think. And so there's lots of administrative donkey work where people may never ever go into an office again. Um, but there is a certain amount of business that needs human interaction, and I wouldn't downplay that actually. Um, one slightly, I wouldn't say comic, but one sidelight to all of this is in the financial world. When are we going to start getting the huge insider dealing scandals? Because there was a lot of dealing doing from home and wasn't being properly regulated in financial institutions. I'm eagerly awaiting some of these actually.
Well, as we've seen the market lose a lot of cash, I think we're going to see a lot of interesting stories in the coming weeks. And
That's Mr. Buffett's phrase, isn't it? When the tide goes out, we'll see who's wearing the shorts.
Exactly.
You know.
It's always easy to be wealthy when everything is going in the right direction. But all right, Metropolitan Madness. That sounds like either a great punk rock band, a great movie, or a West End play. So this is our favorite segment, what we're reading and watching.
Indeed.
Gerald, I will let you go first.
Well, I went to one of those great British or English institutions last week, the local Garden Fete. This is basically kids' dance troupes, the Boy Scouts, little old ladies who are selling homemade jam, and of course the inevitable secondhand bookstore. And I came across, I think this book was written in 1950, and this is a paperback, I think from 1956, so it's a touch older than me. And it's called The Happy Odyssey, and we'll have a link in to the show notes. This guy is the most unbelievable guy. In fact, you can't believe he is a real person. He is Sir Adrian Carton de Viat, Victoria Cross, Knight of the British Empire, Commander of the Bath, Commander of the Order of St. Michael and St. George, and a Distinguished Service Order. And he's more English than English, and I'm slightly reminded of David Buick a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure David will forgive me saying this, but like lots of people who seem very English, he wasn't English at all. He was born in Belgium. But this book, every single event from about 1910 to 1950, First World War, Second World War, Treaty of Versailles, advisor to Chiang Kai-shek in China, you name it, he's involved in it. And he also managed to lose an eye, lost some fingers off one of his hands. He had to bite one off because he couldn't find somebody to cut one. I mean, it's just extraordinary. So somebody's got to make it into a film, but it's just a fascinating sort of front row seat to lots of world events. So there we are, The Happy Odyssey, recommended.
It sounds like a very almost Forrest Gump of geopolitics.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary. You would think, oh no, this can't be true, but people can look up what's his proper name here again, Sir Adrian Carton de Viat. We'll have to put a link in for that. But he is a fascinating character. In terms of what we're watching, I was just channel hopping the other night, and I ended up watching a film that I missed when it came out. I think it came out in 2016. It's a sort of biopic of Eddie Edwards, Eddie the Eagle. And I actually do remember quite well him competing in the 1988 Calgary Winter Games.
Yeah.
And he was sneered at by a lot of people. And then there was this period where he was thought to be a bit of a joke. But actually, the film, which plays it straight down the middle, does show a remarkable mix of courage and sheer lunacy, basically. It's no mean thing to try and jump off one of those things, I'm sure. I mean, the landing thing is that angle.
Well, the jumping is probably the easy part. It's for me, it's probably the land.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, Eddie the Eagle, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's kind of it's not schmaltzy, but it is a sort of heartwarming film for all the right reasons, and got some amusing moments as well. So
yeah, I do remember. I do remember the Calgary Olympics and Eddie the Eagle. Fantastic. I mean, that's why the Olympics are so wonderful.
I would just briefly say, mind you, the establishment wanted to squeeze him out. They weren't.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. No, so it's perfect. The IOC, these various commissions running these various sports. I mean,
yeah, all these guys are wearing blazers, and never good news, right?
Exactly. Whenever you see a blazer at a sporting event, you know something's probably amiss. Yeah, I stumbled upon the show as well. It's from 2013, so it's about a decade old now, but it's called Italy Impact. It's a BBC show. It's an art critic and a chef. They essentially drive the west coast and east coast of Italy. 9 episodes, absolutely fantastic. They stumble across all kinds of crazy art and architecture, and they make these very kind of modest peasant dishes. But it's a great little travel show, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
That's Andrew Graham Dixon,
right?
And he may still be the arts editor for the Times, maybe the Guardian. He's kind of a big name in art. And Senor Locatelli,
Giorgio Locatelli, correct?
He's quite a famous restaurateur here in London. He's opened various places, some more successful than others, but he's a highly regarded chef in London. And I have vague memories of watching this series, so I might try and dial it up again. Yeah,
actually, being here in the States, I'll send you. I found it all on YouTube, so I'll send you a link to that. So I'm sure there's some copyright infringement policy there, but that's the power of the internet. So enjoy it while we can. The other thing, a book I read a few months ago, but I thought I would share with everybody. It's The Science of Storytelling. Talks about the neuroscience, the myths, archetypes. Just how to be a better writer. Fascinating book, really easy read, great examples, but a good reminder of storytelling is at the core of humanity. And, sometimes it's best not to overthink what we're writing and keep it simple, keep it human. Good book.
Isn't that actually the art of writing, is to keep it simple? The best writers are the people who can do that.
It reminded me a lot of this TV show. I mean, essentially, you got two obviously smart, interesting people. They're in a car. They're driving through Italy. Pretty simple. Great show. I mean, absolutely. Why overthink it? Fantastic.
Well, it's also from your favorite part of the world. And now we come to the all-important message for our potential sponsors, don't we?
Maybe we need to introduce some subliminal advertising. Like this should pop up every 30 seconds or 3 seconds.
I wonder if we should start drinking Peroni beer or something like that.
We need to step it up. Maybe we need to send this directly to the ambassador here in DC. Just say, hey,
nothing ventured, nothing gained. we got to get to Rome or Milan or somewhere somehow. So
what's the worst thing that can happen? We get sent to Bologna.
And don't the key thing in Bologna, don't mention the bolognese sauce. Apparently, they get very angry about that because it's not. It's not.
Yeah, it's in a Western, or it's a.
Yeah, it's you guys again. It's the Americans again.
Yeah.
Bologna, don't go for the sauce, basically.
Don't go for the sauce, but go for the communism. It's the red. It's the Reds, right?
Yeah, very much so. This shows what local knowledge we have of Italy. It's amazing we're not already signed up.
It's amazing, yeah. And I don't know, maybe communism will come back. Maybe Bologna will lead the way, so we'll see.
Well, that's a cheerful note to end on.
Communism just hasn't been tried yet. It hasn't been tried properly. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the old joke, isn't it? Yeah.
All right, Gerald, this was a lot of fun. We're going to be back in June. We're going to be we'll get the U.S. Memorial Day coming here in the States. We got the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which is absolutely unbelievable. So we're going to get connected after that, have a chat about that. I saw Prince Charles is in Canada this week, and the Canadians are, discussions about whether to keep the monarchy in Canada. So interesting stuff.
I mean, we may not want to keep Canada. So these things cut both ways. There's
two sides to that loony. Okay. All right, Gerald, thanks a lot.
Good
We'll
stuff.
see you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.